The storm was coming fast, the kind of wind that bends trees and tests souls. In the heart of Red Leaf Forest, two sisters barely old enough to understand the weight of life knelt beside a man who was losing his. Blood soaked the earth. The cold bit into their skin, and their only shield was a limping German shepherd who refused to back down. That day, courage didn't come from a badge or a uniform. It came from small hands, steady hearts, and the kind of love that refuses to let go. If loyalty and courage still mean something to you, tell us where you're watching from, because this is a story worth carrying in your heart. The wind whispered through the scarlet and amber leaves of Red Leaf Forest, scattering the first fallen ones across the mossy trails like forgotten letters. It was late October in Alder Glen, Vermont, the kind of crisp Saturday morning that smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, when the whole town seemed to exist inside an old storybook. 10-year old Willa Fairweather walked ahead, her hazel eyes sharp and watchful beneath the loose braid, brushing her navy scarf. Just a step behind, her twin sister June wandered with a softer gaze, distracted by every leaf and stone that caught her eye. Though they shared the same small frame and matching forest green jackets with frayed sleeves, they were as different as the two forks of a river. Willa the protector, June the dreamer. At their heels padded Rusty, a 5-year-old German shepherd, with a limp in his left hind leg and amber eyes that saw everything. Once trained for search and rescue, he'd failed certification after a hip injury. But what he lacked in speed, he made up for in heart. Always alert, always near, the silent guardian of two little girls, who didn't yet understand how much they needed him. The South Trail was nearly abandoned this time of year. Leaves crunched under their boots, the forest's quiet broken only by distant deer. Then Rusty stopped, ears sharp, nose lifted. "Something's wrong," Willa whispered. Before they could react, Rusty gave a short, urgent bark and darted into the trees. They followed, lungs tight, hearts pounding. 30 paces in, they saw him, a man slumped at the base of a red maple, half hidden by fallen brush. The dark green of his sheriff's deputy uniform was soaked in blood pooling beneath him, the color stark against the damp earth. His face was pale, lips tinged blue, each breath shallow and weak. "June." "He's alive," Willa said, her voice trembling. Rusty circled the man without panic, as if knowing that every second counted. June fumbled with the old flip phone their mother made them carry, the screen flickering before it lit. "I'm calling 911. Deputy Cole Maddox had been with the department for 3 years, a quiet man who preferred patrolling the lesser-known trails. What no one else knew was that he had been tracking a dangerous group involved in illegal logging and weapons trade. He wasn't supposed to be there that morning, but instinct had led him into a trap. Willa pulled off her scarf and pressed it to the wound, her hand steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Hold this," she told June, who pressed down hard, biting her lip to keep from crying. "They said 20 minutes, June whispered after the call. "We're deep in the woods." "Too long," Willa muttered. She found a stick, broke it in half, and twisted the scarf into a crude tourniquet. "Don't die. You're not allowed." Rusty lay down beside Cole's legs, his body still but his eyes locked on the girls, as if guarding both them and the man between life and death. In town, their mother Maris sat in their small apartment above the shuttered bakery, staring at a spiral notebook filled with unpaid bills. When the phone rang and Officer Ramos told her what her daughters had done, relief and terror tangled in her chest. She had no idea they even knew how to stop bleeding. She'd barely had time to teach them much of anything beyond surviving. In the forest, the distant wail of sirens cut through the cold air. June's fingers were numb, Willa's voice hoarse from whispering, "Hold on," over and over. AMTs rushed in, a gray-haired medic taking over with swift, practiced hands. "You just saved a man's life," she told them. "Really?" Willa asked. "Really?" Rusty barked once, then leaned his side against June's legs. And for a brief moment, in the heart of the forest, surrounded by fallen leaves and flashing lights, the world felt steady again. Frost clung to the corners of the fairweather, apartment windows like delicate lacework as Sunday morning crept into Alder Glen. The town still held onto its autumn colors, stubborn against the coming winter. Inside, the kettle rattled gently on the stove while Mara stood with her shoulders stiff, the weight of yesterday pressing into her bones. Willa and June sat at the kitchen table in their pajamas, cheeks flushed from the warm air vent below. Under the bench, Rusty lay curled, his breathing slow, his ears twitching in dream. A knock broke the quiet. Maris opened the door to a tall woman in a charcoal gray coat. "Detective Valerie Monroe," the woman introduced herself, her voice low but warm. She was lean, composed, and had dark eyes that seemed to notice everything. "I wanted to thank you," Monroe said, looking at the twins. "Deputy Maddox is alive because of you." Willa and June glanced at each other, unsure how to respond. Monroe didn't push. Sometimes bravery looks like medals. Sometimes it looks like mittens pressed into a wound. Maris nodded, pride and worry twisting together. "They did what they thought was right." Monroe smiled faintly. "That's more than many adults would have done. He's out of surgery, stable. He asked about you both." Rusty stirred and gave a soft woof. Monroe's gaze softened. "And this must be the hero behind the heroes." June stroked Rusty's fur. "He knows who the good people are." "Dogs always do," Monroe murmured, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. By that afternoon, word had spread. The local news van parked outside, and anchor Holly Marks stood in a bright red coat, asking for an interview. Maris hesitated but gave in when she saw the hopeful look on her daughter's faces. At 6 p.m. The segment aired. Images of the forest, the flashing lights, and two shy girls recounting what happened. Willa spoke about how Rusty had led them to Cole. June held up the scarf still stained with his blood. "We just wanted to help," she said softly. "No one should have to be alone like that." The video spread quickly, and messages poured in offers of donations, praise, and invitations. Maris turned off the notifications. She didn't want charity. She wanted stability. That night, Monroe sat in her car in the precinct parking lot, staring at the case file. Photos of logging equipment, lists of known felons, Cole's preliminary report, all pointing to something more dangerous than anyone had admitted. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone respected in town was involved. Back in the Fairweather apartment, the girls slept soundly, Rusty curled protectively at their feet. Maris sat at the kitchen table, staring at her notebook. Again, this time, alongside the bills, she had a fresh-page bakery recipe she once made with joy. The oven hadn't worked properly in months. When she opened the door to retrieve a knock that evening, she found an envelope on the mat. Inside, a note in neat handwriting read, "From someone who knows what it's like to raise kids alone." Number. Strings, just gratitude. VM. Tucked inside was a gift card to the local grocery store. Mara stood in the doorway for a long time, the cool night air brushing against her arms. She didn't cry, but a knot inside her chest loosened. The next morning at Alder Glen Elementary, the hall smelled of pencil shavings and floor wax. Paper stars lined the walls, and in the center hung a photo of Willa and June under the words "Local Heroes." In the multipurpose room, Principal Naomi Hayes tapped the microphone. "Students, today we honor courage, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that acts quietly when no one is watching." Willa and June stepped up on stage, their sweaters freshly laundered. Rusty, given special permission to attend, sat at their feet wearing a handmade paper medal. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, Naomi crouched to Rusty's level. "You're a good boy," she murmured. Meanwhile, across town, Cole Maddox lay in a hospital bed, healing but restless. when Detective Monroe arrived with a manila envelope. She didn't waste time. "You look better," she said. "Looks deceive," he replied. She handed him the photos, tire tracks, a rusted pistol, and a cracked radio casing. His eyes fixed on the last one. "That's police issue. Late 90s. My dad carried one just like it." "You think this shooting is connected?" Monroe asked. "I think someone's been waiting for 20 years, Cole said quietly. "Maris." Fairweather stood at the kitchen counter, phone pressed to her ear, her voice tight. "Please, I know I'm behind, but I can make up for it. This season could turn things around." The market manager's answer was polite, but final. "Maris, you still owe back dues from last fall. I can't open a stall until it's settled." "I'm sorry." She hung up, rubbing her temple. On the dresser sat a half-filled mason jar labeled Oven Fund. Willa had started it months ago, slipping coins inside when she thought her mother wasn't looking. That afternoon, Willa tugged June's sleeve. "Come on, there's something I need to check." They told their mom they were cleaning their room, but instead followed Rusty toward the southern edge of Red Leaf Forest. Willa's boots crunched. "Over frost and leaves. Remember where he barked last week? He never does that unless something's off." Rusty led them to a clearing near an overgrown logging path. Rusted barrels sat half-buried in mud. Suddenly, Rusty stiffened, ears forward, and barked, sharp, insistent. Willa scribbled in her notebook, south of Miller's Hollow. Rusty reactive, possible scent. She snapped a blurry photo with June's old flip phone, then tucked the page into her shoebox of treasures, a private archive of leaf rubbings, smooth stones, and now, a clue that felt heavier than all the rest. That night, Monroe crossed the precinct parking lot and passed Officer Daniel Carnes, the new transfer from Montpelier. "Evening, Detective," he called, a good-natured grin on his face. "Evening, Carnes. You look like someone with a favor to ask." He chuckled. "Thanksgiving drive. My sister's collecting baked goods. Any chance of those lemon squares?" "From last month?" Monroe arched a brow. "I don't bake." He blinked. "Then who?" She didn't answer, but she remembered. The lemon squares had come from a small table outside the Fairweather apartment. A hand-lettered sign had read, $1. Help us fix our oven. Night settled early over Alder Glen. In the Fairweather kitchen, the smell of burnt wire lingered as Maris crouched in front of the oven, tools scattered around her. Willa held a flashlight in her teeth while June organized the toolbox. Rusty lay across the doorway, ears perked. "Try it now," Willa called. Maris twisted the knob. "Nothing," June suggested. "Maybe Principal Hayes could fix it. She once repaired a projector with a paper clip." Maris laughed under her breath. But before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Willa returned with a medium brown box. A receipt on top read, "Apple Cinnamon Crumble X2." Inside was a note, "Please deliver by Sunday. My grandmother misses your baking." Miller. Maris didn't know the name. She didn't mention it to the girls, just tucked the note into her recipe book and went back to the oven. Across town, Monroe parked her sedan at the Miller's Hollow trailhead. Cole was already waiting, flashlight in hand. His limp was slight now, but his eyes were focused. Willa said Rusty barked near the old power trail. Cole said. They walked into the dark, frost crunching under their boots. The forest was still, except for the creak of distant branches. After 20 minutes, they reached a vine-covered clearing. Cole stopped abruptly, crouching near a cluster of rocks. A cracked handheld radio lay half buried in soil, the speaker grill smeared with something dark. He lifted it gently, gloved hands steady. On the back, faint but visible, were the initials Gia. Monroe's breath caught. "Your father." Cole nodded once. "I think so." There were shallow drag marks nearby and faint boot prints, old, but not erased entirely by time. "We'll call forensics tomorrow," Monroe said. "This isn't nothing." The next morning, She placed the radio on Sergeant Louis Corian's desk. The older man's hands trembled as he turned it over. They stopped issuing this model in 2003. George Maddox carried one like it until the day he vanished. "You think someone in the department was involved?" Monroe asked. Corian's eyes darkened. "I think secrets don't stay buried forever, not even here." Back at the Fairweather apartment, a cheer rang out as the oven finally roared to life. The warm glow inside reflected in Willa's wide eyes. Rusty barked once, tail wagging, as Maris pulled the first tray of cinnamon apple pastries from the heat. Outside, winter's edge pressed closer, but for now, inside that small kitchen, the air was rich with the scent of brown sugar and the quiet hope of something better. By late afternoon, the wind had begun to change. It started as a restless murmur through the trees, but within hours the sky over Alder Glen darkened to a deep charcoal. The air turned sharp, heavy with the kind of cold that warned of something more than just rain. Maris stood at the apartment window, apron still dusted with flour, eyes scanning the street. The twins had promised to stay near the edge of the forest, but they hadn't returned. Rusty's food bowl sat untouched in the kitchen, his absence gnawing at her nerves. In the forest, Willa and June huddled beneath the gnarled roots of an upturned tree. The temperature had dropped fast. Rain now fell sideways, carried by gusts that shrieked through the branches. Rusty crouched close, his ears flat, chest heaving from the run that had brought them here. It had begun innocently enough. They'd followed the same trail as before, Willa's notebook in hand, hoping to trace more of the path where Rusty had reacted days earlier. But halfway in, they'd heard voices, not the gentle chatter of hikers, but the sharp, hushed tones of men who didn't belong. A flicker of light through the trees, the glint of headlamps. Then the words that turned their blood cold. Those girls saw something. Rusty's growl was low, urgent. Willa didn't hesitate. "Run," she whispered. They darted off the path, weaving between trees, the ground slick with leaves. Rusty stayed ahead, leading them to the hollow that now served as their fragile shelter. Above the howl of the wind, footsteps crunched in the wet undergrowth. The voices grew closer. In the sheriff's office, Detective Monroe stared at the storm. Tracking map when the phone rang. Maris's voice was tight with panic. "They're missing." They went toward the forest, near Miller's Hollow. Monroe's stomach dropped. She didn't waste time with reassurances. Cole was already in the doorway, jacket zipped, determination hardening his expression. "I'm going," he said. "We go together," Monroe replied, tossing him a radio. Minutes later, they were in the department's 4x4, pushing through flooded roads as branches cracked and fell around them. Every minute felt stolen from the clock. Back in the woods, Willa leaned into June. "If something happens, you run." "I'm not leaving you," June whispered back. A sharp snap echoed through the storm. Rusty rose, moving between the girls and the sound. Two figures emerged from the dark, heavy coats, their faces shadowed, eyes scanning the underbrush. "I saw them head this way," one muttered. Rusty's bark exploded through the rain. He lunged forward, all muscle and fury, slamming into the first man with enough force to knock him backward into the mud. The second swung a metal rod, catching Rusty along his side. The shepherd yelped, but instead of retreating, he attacked again, driving both men deeper into the forest, away from the girls. The twins sat frozen, the sound of the fight swallowed by the storm. Headlights cut through the darkness, bouncing off wet branches. Cole jumped from the vehicle before it stopped, flashlight and weapon in hand. "Willa! June! Here!" A small voice cried from the hollow. Monroe reached them first, dropping to her knees, pulling June close. Cole knelt beside Willa, his hands trembling as he checked her over. "You're safe now. We've got you." Then a low whimper cut through the noise. Rusty stumbled from the tree line, blood staining his flank, his limp pronounced. His eyes found the girl's, tail giving a single thump before his legs gave out. "Rusty!" They cried together. Cole scooped the dog into his arms, feeling the heat of the wound even through his jacket. "He's hurt bad." They piled into the 4x4, Monroe radioing ahead to the emergency vet. The drive back was slow, the rain hammering the roof, but inside there was a fragile, heavy silence, part awe, part fear, part desperate hope. At the animal hospital, Dr. Martha Liu, a petite woman with steady hands, worked quickly. "He's lost a lot of blood," she said. "If he makes it through the night, he'll recover." The girls refused to leave his side. Back home, wrapped in blankets, Willa finally whispered to June, "I thought maybe Mom would give up on us, that she'd get too tired of trying." June shook her head. "She never would. We just need her. And Rusty, that's all." Across the room, Cole sat quietly, hearing every word, the edges of his own grief bending toward something he hadn't felt in years, the fragile beginnings of family. A month passed, and with it the sharp bite of late autumn began to soften. Red Leaf Forest now stood bare, its branches stretched toward the pale sky like silent witnesses. Frost still kissed the grass each morning, but the sun had returned, warm enough to turn the sidewalks of Alder Glen golden dot in the market square. A modest wooden booth stood under a newly painted sign, "Crumbs and Crusts." The air was rich with the scent of maple-glazed scones and spiced apple tarts. Behind the counter, Maris Fairweather worked with her sleeves rolled and cheeks flushed, this time from the oven's heat, not from worry. She still carried a quiet wariness in her eyes, but it had softened into something closer to hope. On one side of the booth, a chalkboard read, "Ask about our hero muffins." Willa and June moved between trays and customers, wearing matching red beanies and smiles too big for their faces. Beneath the table, Rusty lay stretched out, a clean bandage still wrapped around his flank. His tail wagged lazily whenever a hand reached down to scratch his ears. Across town, the gymnasium at Alder Glen's Municipal Center had been transformed. Navy and white balloons framed the stage, and a banner stretched overhead, "Junior Lifesaver Program Launch," in honor of Willa and June Fairweather. Rows of children sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes fixed on the tall man stepping to the microphone. Deputy Cole Maddox looked stronger now, though he still walked with a slight limp. His uniform sleeves were rolled to his elbows, the faint scar at his temple catching the light. He cleared his throat, voice steady. "Sometimes heroes don't carry badges or wear capes," he began. "Sometimes they're 10 years old, with scraped knees and more courage than most of us put together." The crowd laughed softly. June ducked behind her sister's shoulder. Willa grinned. "Because of these girls," Cole continued, "we're starting something new, a program where kids will learn first aid, emergency response, and the importance of staying calm when it matters most." Applause rang through the hall. When the clapping faded, Detective Monroe stepped onto the stage, wearing her formal dress coat and holding a small velvet box. "And finally," she said, her voice warm but reverent, "we want to honor another member of this town. One who walks on 4 legs but has the heart of a lion." Rusty trotted forward on his own, a bright blue ribbon already looped around his neck. Monroe knelt to clip a small round medal onto it, K-9 Civilian Honor Award. The crowd stood to their feet. Willa leaned toward June. "He looks like he's smiling." That evening, the Fairweathers returned home as a family of 5, 3 humans. One heroic German shepherd and a new sourdough starter the girls had named Gutsy. Cole came with them, his arms full of leftover muffins, his place at the table already marked on the family chore chart, dishwasher and storyteller. Later, as the girls helped Maris pack away the last of the day's baked goods, Monroe stopped by. She handed Cole a cassette tape in a worn plastic case. "It was found in an old department archive," she said quietly. "Misfiled for years." Cole frowned. but said nothing until they gathered in the living room. Maris dug an old tape player from the closet, and the room fell silent as a rough, low voice filled the air. "If you're hearing this, I guess I didn't make it out. That's not what I wanted. But if one day you find yourself facing a choice between doing what's safe and doing what's right, please, son, choose right, even if it costs you. This badge means nothing if you're too afraid to use it when it matters." No one spoke when the tape ended. Cole sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor, the weight of 20 years of unanswered questions pressing against his chest. Outside, the last light of day faded over Alder Glen. Inside, Rusty stretched on the rug, sighing deeply. As if satisfied that for now his family was safe, the wind carried the first hint of snow through Alder Glen, a fine, sharp chill that slipped under doors and settled in the bones. In the Fairweather apartment, Maris was already up before dawn, kneading dough on the kitchen counter. The soft rhythm of her hands against the floured wood was joined by the faint jingle of Rusty's collar as he patrolled the small space. Ever watchful. Cole sat at the table with a mug of coffee, the cassette tape from his father resting near his elbow. He'd listened to it twice more during the night, memorizing every word, every pause. There was a strange comfort in the sound of his father's voice, even wrapped in the ache of what it meant. "You didn't sleep," Maris observed quietly, not looking up from the dough. "Not much," Cole admitted. "Monroe's running a deeper check on the old case files today. I'm meeting her after lunch." Willa shuffled in, hair tangled from sleep, holding her notebook like she'd been working on it in bed. She dropped it onto the table beside Cole. "We found something yesterday," she said matter-of-factly. Cole raised a brow. "Found what?" "A metal thing. Looked like part of a walkie-talkie." Rusty sniffed at it for a long time. She flipped to a page covered in tidy handwriting. Entry number 4, small metal plate. "South Trail near Miller's Hollow." Initials scratched but hard to read. Cole leaned forward. "You still have it?" Willa shook her head. "We left it there. Mom says we can't keep bringing home weird forest junk." Cole almost smiled, then glanced at Maris. "Can I take them back there later?" Maris gave him a wary look. "If Monroe's with you." By midday, Cole and Monroe were at the trailhead with the twins and Rusty. The forest felt different now, not just because of the season's shift, but because every shadow seemed to hold a question. Rusty took the lead, nose low, tail stiff. "This way," Willa said, guiding them to a small dip in the ground near a cluster of mossy stones. She crouched and pointed. Half buried in wet leaves was a corroded radio plate, no larger than a palm. Monroe brushed it clean with a gloved hand. Faintly etched into the metal were the same 2 letters that had been on the cracked radio they'd found before. GM Cole stared at it for a long moment. "This isn't coincidence." Monroe nodded, slipping the piece into an evidence bag. "If this was dropped here recently, someone's been back to this site, maybe more than once." Rusty suddenly barked, sharp and quick. Everyone turned. At the edge of the clearing, barely visible through the thinning trees, was a figure in a dark coat watching them. The man didn't move, didn't speak, and then, just as suddenly, he turned and disappeared into the forest. Monroe was moving. Before anyone else, cutting across the clearing with Cole right behind her. But by the time they reached the ridge, the figure was gone. Back at the precinct, Monroe spread the new evidence on her desk. "Someone is making sure these clues stay where they can be found," she said. "Almost like they want us to piece it together, but on their timeline." Cole folded his arms, jaw tight. "Or they're toying with us." That evening, the Fairweathers gathered for dinner. Cole joined them, still restless from the afternoon's chase. Willa and June chattered about school, their voices softening the edges of the day. Rusty lay under the table, head resting on Willa's foot, eyes half closed but ears alert. Maris poured coffee into Cole's mug and said quietly, "Whoever's behind this, you'll stop them, right?" Cole met her eyes. "I have to," For him, for all of you. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting golden halos onto the frosted sidewalks. Somewhere in the quiet town, someone else was watching, waiting for the next move. Snow began to fall before dawn, thin flakes drifting through the streetlights and settling on the silent rooftops of Alder Glen. In the precinct, Detective Monroe sat alone at her desk, the soft hiss of the radiator the only sound in the quiet building. Spread out before her were the old files from George Maddox's disappearance, faded photographs, hand-drawn maps, and statements written in a dozen different hands. One statement caught her eye again, an account from a retired game warden, who claimed to have seen two men unloading crates near Miller's Hollow the week George vanished. No names, no follow-up. The report had been buried under a stack of unrelated poaching complaints. Cole stepped into the office, snow dusting the shoulders of his coat. "You didn't sleep either," he said. "Not when the answers are this close." Monroe replied, sliding the statement toward him. "Your father was tracking someone the night he disappeared. I think those same people, or whoever came after them, are still out there." Cole studied the paper. "And now they're sending us breadcrumbs." Monroe's gaze was steady. "Or warnings." Meanwhile, at the Fairweather apartment, the morning smelled of cinnamon muffins and wood polish. Maris was packing a basket for the market while Willa and June were getting ready for school. Rusty watched from his spot by the door, tail thumping once every so often. As Willa zipped her jacket, she froze. "Mom, someone's outside." Maris glanced toward the window. Across the street, a dark SUV idled, exhaust curling into the cold air. The driver's face was hidden in shadow. When he noticed the curtains move, the vehicle eased forward and disappeared around the corner. Maris's unease followed her all day. She told Cole about it that afternoon when he stopped by the booth at the market. His expression hardened. "If you see it again, call me. Don't wait." By late afternoon, Monroe had pieced together enough to form a theory. "The illegal logging operation your father was investigating? I think it was just a front. These guys were running weapons through the forest trails, using the old logging roads to move shipments. He stumbled onto them, and they made sure he never made it back." Cole's voice was low. "And now they think I'm too close." "Not think," Monroe said grimly. "They know." That night, Willa and June were supposed to be asleep, but the soft glow from their bedroom told another story. Willa sat cross-legged on the bed, notebook open, whispering as she wrote, "Entry number 5, black SUV outside the apartment." Rusty growled before it drove away. June yawned. "Do you think it's connected?" Willa looked toward Rusty, who was curled at the foot of the bed, his amber eyes open and watchful. "If he thinks so, then yeah." The next morning, Monroe and Cole returned to the clearing where they'd found the radio plate. Fresh snow covered the ground, but near the base of a rotting log, Monroe spotted a new set of footprints, heavy boots, leading toward an abandoned hunting shack deep in the trees. They followed the trail cautiously, the snow muffling their steps. The shack came into view through the pines, its roof sagging under the weight of years. Cole peered through a gap in the wall and froze. Inside, on a dusty table, sat a stack of old police radios, and in the center, a badge tarnished with time. Cole reached for it with gloved hands. The nameplate was scratched, but the letters were still clear. George Maddox. His breath caught, the air sharp in his lungs. Monroe scanned the room, her instincts humming. "Someone wanted you to find this," she whispered. Before Cole could answer, the faint sound of an engine reached their ears. Tires crunching over snow. Someone was coming. They slipped back into the trees just as a dark SUV rolled into the clearing. Two men stepped out, their movements deliberate, their eyes scanning the shack. Cole's jaw tightened. "They're not just ghosts from the past," he murmured. "They're still running the same game," Monroe nodded. "And now we're on their list." The snow kept falling into the night, quieting the streets of Alder Glen until the whole town seemed to hold its breath. In the fair-weather apartment, the warmth of the oven filled the small kitchen. Maris moved between the counter and the table, kneading bread while Willa and June decorated paper snowflakes for the market booth. Rusty lay near the door, head on his paws, ears pricked toward every sound outside. Cole sat at the table with Monroe, the badge they'd recovered from the shack resting between them. His fingers traced the scratched letters. He knew, Cole said quietly. He knew he might not come back. Monroe leaned forward, and now we know who's behind it. But we need proof, something that ties them to the operation now. Not 20 years ago. The sound came suddenly, a low rumble outside, the crunch of tires over snow. Rusty was on his feet before anyone else, a deep growl rolling from his chest. Cole rose, scanning the window. The same black SUV from before had stopped across the street. Two men stepped out, their coats bulky, their faces shadowed beneath knit caps. Maris, take the girls into the bedroom, Cole ordered. Rusty stood. Between the door and the rest of the room, muscles taut despite his still healing flank. The knock that followed was slow, deliberate. Cole moved to the door, Monroe at his side. "You're not supposed to be here," she called through the wood. A voice answered, calm but cold. "Neither are you, Detective." Cole cracked the door. Just enough to see the man's face, one of the two from the shack. The man's eyes flicked toward the interior. "Tell the girls to stay out of the forest. Tell the dog to stay home. You both keep digging, and you won't like what you find." Before Cole could respond, the man stepped back toward the SUV. Rusty barked, sharp and explosive. The other man flinched, muttering something to his partner before they climbed into the vehicle and drove away. Monroe's voice was tight. "They're getting bolder." The next day, Monroe called in a favor from the state police. By dusk, unmarked vehicles were positioned near the Miller's Hollow trailhead. Cole, Monroe, and a small tactical team moved through the forest, guided by the faint hum of an idling engine ahead. Through the trees, they saw it, the SUV parked beside the hunting shack, the men unloading crates into the back. Monroe signaled. The takedown was quick, the suspects caught off guard. Inside the crates were enough illegal firearms to confirm every suspicion they'd had about the operation, and enough evidence to tie it to the night George Maddox vanished. By the time they returned to town, the snow had stopped. Lights glowed in the market square, and the fair-weather booth was still open, a small line of customers waiting for muffins and cider. Maris looked up as Cole approached, her relief plain. Willa and June hurried out from behind the counter, rapping, their arms around Rusty, who stood proudly at Cole's side. He did it again. "Mom," June said, scratching behind Rusty's ears. He scared them off. Cole crouched to meet the dog's amber gaze. "You didn't just scare them, boy. You helped finish what my dad started." That night, they gathered in the fair-weather kitchen. The bread Maris had baked filled the room with its rich, yeasty scent. Monroe stopped by, snow still clinging to her coat, and set a manila folder on the table. "It's over," she said simply. And Cole, "Your father didn't just vanish. He fought to stop this. He chose right." Cole nodded, the weight of years lifting, replaced by something quieter but stronger. Later, Willa and June sat on the front steps. Knees hugged their chests, Rusty between them. The stars glittered above, the world still and cold. "Do you think we really saved someone?" Willa asked. June smiled faintly. "I think we saved more than one." Rusty wagged his tail once, a slow, steady thump against the wood, as if he agreed. And in the quiet of that winter night, surrounded by family, they knew the truth, that courage isn't always loud and heroes aren't always grown. Sometimes they come in the shape of two small hands, a wounded shepherd, and the choice to do what's right, no matter the cost.